Tonight on NewsWatch, President Obama jokes he can do whatever he wants, but he just did it for real with Obamacare. Why some say he's gone too far. Plus, terror in the Sinai. Have Islamic radicals found a new safe haven in Egypt? And crossing the racial divide. The amazing story of two very different churches and how they came together. All this and much more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendy Griffith. Debate over the pros and cons of Obamacare surges again with yet another change to the health care law. Now, critics of the president are asking once more if he's overstepped his constitutional authority. Dale Hurd takes a closer look in our top story tonight.
The Obamacare mandate requiring employers of more than 50 people to provide them with insurance gets postponed by the Treasury Department. Yet another change with the troubled health care plan. Politically, it's called kicking the can down the road. But are all of these willy-nilly changes of a law by the president legal?
This is stuff that you do in a banana republic. It's as if the law is simply a blackboard on which Obama writes any number he wants.
The perception that Obama is acting more like a king than a president was not helped Monday when Mr. Obama was overheard joking with French President Hollande while touring Monticello.
That's the good thing about being president. I can do whatever I want.
This came after a State of the Union address in which the president threatened to act unilaterally without the approval of Congress.
It's a violation of the spirit of the Constitution, if not a violation of the Constitution itself, and it's inappropriate for the leader of the greatest nation on earth to say, I'm going to act on my own whether you like it or not.
From the IRS turned political weapon against the Tea Party to the NSA spy scandal to threats to impose gun control by executive order, and now changing the Affordable Care Act on a whim. Critics say Mr. Obama looks more like a monarch.
I'm against having a king. I think having a monarch is what we fought the American Revolution over, and someone who wants to bypass the Constitution, bypass Congress.
But with Obamacare seeming to unravel more by the day, it will take more than a king to save it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
With all the debate, Democrats are already working damage control before the November congressional elections. They're trying to convince voters the law isn't a big mess. As John Waggy explains, one senator is already in trouble with the numbers he's reporting.
The Senate's second highest-ranking Democrat is under fire after saying Obamacare added millions of new Americans to the health care rolls.
10 million Americans have health insurance today who would not have had it without the Affordable Care Act. 10 million. And we can also say this, it is going to reduce the deficit more than we thought it would. We are seeing a decline in the growth of the cost of health care, exactly our goal in passing this original legislation.
But Monday's Washington Post fact-checker labeled the foundation of Durbin's remarks ridiculous, saying the vast majority of enrollees were previously insured. Republicans were quick to counter Durbin's optimistic claims.
Well, I can tell you that Senator Durbin can spin this all he wants, but I hear it from my constituents. They've been writing me concerned about higher health care costs, losing their plans with their doctor, and also just concerns about a disastrous rollout, gross incompetence.
Democrats say that when Americans see the law at work, voter fears will subside.
What we are going to see, we think, is that first of all, costs are much less than we had predicted them to be. So it's actually costing us less. Healthcare costs have been driven down. There's now more health facilities available in our community. People are using emergency rooms less. All that's going to be positive on our economy.
But if it's not positive or voters don't think it's positive, Democrats run the risk of facing a single-issue tsunami in November's congressional elections. Republicans need to gain 6 seats to take control of the Senate.
In almost every case, the numbers that we're now looking at, whether it's the cost of insurance, the people that are uninsured, or the people that just simply aren't working full-time, is a bigger number and a harder to deal with number than anybody who voted for this law thought it would be. I didn't vote for it. I don't think it has the capacity to work, but all the numbers as they come out exceed the bad news that had been anticipated.
For now, Democrats hope the exemptions granted to businesses and some individuals will help put off much of the debate for the next election. John Waggy, CBN News.
Thanks, John. Hobby Lobby will have its day before the Supreme Court on March 25th. There to argue why it believes its religious rights are being violated by the Obamacare birth control mandate. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty filed a brief with the court this week. Becket Fund attorney Kyle Duncan says the high court must rule on whether the values of the company owners can trump a government mandate. The Obama administration has argued in the past that for-profit businesses don't have religious rights. However, Duncan says the federal law should protect religious freedom wherever it occurs, at home, in a church, in a charity, or a business. Planned Parenthood is paying $2 million to the family of a botched abortion victim. In 2012, Tanya Reeves bled to death at a Planned Parenthood in Chicago. The Thomas More Society calls the payment hush money. Last year, the group filed a complaint requesting an investigation into the clinic responsible for the botched abortion, but no action has been taken. So the society is renewing its call for stronger abortion clinic inspection and regulation in Illinois. They say the money is a slap in the face to every woman who walks through the doors of the nation's largest abortion provider. Well, battles over same-sex marriage are building across the U.S. In Congress, Republican Raul Labrador has introduced a bill to protect believers in traditional marriage. The Marriage and Religious Freedom Act would block the federal government from punishing religious Americans who believe in traditional marriage and sexual morality. Meanwhile, Nevada's attorney general says the state will not uphold a constitutional ban on gay marriage that voters passed in 2002. 8 same-sex couples sued the state, arguing the law is unconstitutional. In Utah and Oklahoma, various religious groups are coming together to urge a federal court to uphold bans on same-sex marriage in both states. They say accusations that their opposition to gay marriage represents bigotry are false and offensive. The Southeast is bunkering down as another winter storm is on the horizon. Substantial snow and ice are expected to cripple the region. Winter storm watches, warnings, and advisories have been posted all the way from Texas to the New Jersey shore. Shirley Temple has more.
The South is bracing for another blast of winter misery. The forecast across the South calls for a dangerous mix of snow and ice. In Georgia, the storm is expected to dump more snow than the 2 inches that paralyzed Atlanta 2 weeks ago. That winter storm created gridlock on interstates in Atlanta, forcing some residents to sleep in their cars, trapping thousands of students in their schools. Now forecasters predict Georgia could see the most significant ice storm in 10 to 20 years. State officials say this time they're ready. Georgia's governor declared a state of emergency ahead of the storm.
We are making every effort to be prepared for these events. And I would simply say that we should all individually use extreme caution.
Frigid temperatures and precipitation are expected to create an icy mess from northeast Texas to the Carolinas. In the Midwest, freezing rain, sleet, and snow have been causing headaches for motorists.
We're used to having the roads scraped to the pavement back east, and it's not the way they do it here.
Some parts of Virginia could pick up a foot of snow. In North Carolina, residents stocked up on food and supplies.
We sold everything we could get our hands on.
Utility crews around the country are trying to restore power to thousands of families who've been in the dark for a week. Meanwhile, wicked weather is also happening out west. Some in California are still cleaning up after heavy rains and snow-triggered mudslides. And in Utah and Colorado, 2 people were killed by avalanches and heavy snow, including 21-year-old student Ashley Cox, who spent last summer helping at an orphanage in Romania.
She just had a good spirit about her, and you felt good when you were around her.
Charlene Israel, CBN News.
At the White House today, President Obama weighed in on international policy, saying the U.S. will come down on businesses that violate sanctions on Iran like a ton of bricks. He made the comments during a joint press conference with French President Francois Hollande, who is in town for a state visit. France joins the U.S. in working to negotiate a final nuclear deal with Iran. Mr. Obama also acknowledged Syrians' peace talks are far from reaching their goal, calling the ordeal enormously frustrating. Several times he called out Russia and Iran for supporting the Assad regime. New video tonight of a Korean-American missionary imprisoned in North Korea. Kenneth Baes was jailed for so-called anti-government acts in November 2012 when he was leading a group tour there. Baes has been sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. He says in the interview he's concerned that his health won't stand up to the rigors of the labor camp and that he's suffering from leg and back pain. He also said he hopes North Korea will allow a U.S. envoy to visit and discuss his case. But North Korea has now rescinded an invitation to the envoy without giving any reason. The video was released by a Korean newspaper based in Japan, and our prayers go out to Kenneth Baes. Well, Christians aren't just facing torture, death, or harassment in North Korea. The U.S. Congress brought attention to the world's 2.3 billion Christians there and how they are now the world's most persecuted religion. And as Paul Strand reports, Christians are attacked for their faith in more than half the world's nations.
Some of the top fighters against persecution from all over the world came to Capitol Hill to sound an alarm at a House hearing about the global war against Christians. The bottom line is, though Christians are the largest group of people in the world, they face more persecution than anyone. It's increasing, and no one's doing much about it.
It is a huge problem, and it's getting worse, not just in the Middle East, but it's getting worse there. China, North Korea, there's an explosion of persecution against Christians, including martyrdom, torture, harassment of all kinds.
2/3 of the Christians in the world today live outside the West. They live in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and other places where they are targets of convenience for anybody who is mad at the West, who is mad at Europe, mad at the United States. It's tough to take that out on the American consulate. It's very easy to take it out on the Christian church down the street.
Persecution of Christians is growing around the world, and Congress needs to pay more attention to it. It needs to be a higher priority issue in our relations with all of these countries where this persecution takes place.
We've seen increasing attacks against Christian workers, pastors, even sexual attacks against women. But the concern also is the impunity that is being enjoyed by the forces that are doing this.
And expert John Allen points out this isn't just about Muslim radicals persecuting Christians, since so many groups take their ire out on Christ's followers.
It is a fact that radical Islam is the world's leading manufacturer of anti-Christian hatred. But it is equally a fact that radical Islam could fall off to the planet tomorrow and Christians would not be safe.
Congressman Chris Smith, chairman for this hearing, pointed out Christians right now face violence, displacement, or discrimination in 110 nations of the world. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Paul. Coming up, a jihadist insurgency in Egypt. Can the government withstand the terror tactics of al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood? Welcome back. Iranians celebrated the 35th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution today. Hundreds of thousands of Iranians rallied in Tehran, shouting the same old chants of down with the U.S. and death to Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has blasted Iran for sending warships close to America's shores. Netanyahu says the move shows that easing sanctions on Iran has not stopped its aggression. The Iranian fleet consists of a destroyer and a supply ship. The ships carry some 30 Navy Academy cadets for training, along with regular crews. Well, suspected Islamic militants blew up a key gas pipeline in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula today. Since the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi, radical Muslims have waged a much more widespread campaign of violence against the state. George Thomas reports on what many fear is a simmering insurgency.
Since July 3rd, when Egypt's powerful military removed Islamist President Morsi from power, nearly 17,000 Muslim Brotherhood members and other political activists have been imprisoned. The military here insists they are in a war for survival against terrorists.
The government has to take all necessary precautions in order to finish any activities of the Muslim Brotherhood.
But some Egyptians are beginning to accuse the military of oppressive tactics and blame them for fueling a jihadist insurgency in retaliation for Morsi's ouster.
It is clear that the military has the upper hand, and we are turning into a dictatorship against secular forces.
While a sense of calm has certainly returned to parts of Cairo, the potential for renewed violence still looms very large. And now there is a growing insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula, with frequent attacks against security personnel. More than 200 security forces have been killed since last year, many of them by an al-Qaeda-inspired group known as Ansar Bet al-Maqdis, Arabic for the Champions of Jerusalem. On Tuesday, the group was suspected of blowing up a pipeline in the Sinai Peninsula that carries natural gas to Jordan. They've also staged a series of bombings and suicide attacks on security forces in recent months. Egypt, which has branded the Brotherhood a terrorist group, has accused its former leader of creating a military wing to attack security personnel.
As long as elements of the Muslim Brotherhood continue to use violence, it opens the door for the military to also use violence against them, giving the state lots of authority to crack down and potentially turn us into a police state.
To control the Islamist rise, the government this week ordered all mosques to deliver the same message, which must be approved by authorities ahead of time. Muslim preachers who disobey the order will be replaced. George Thomas, CBN News, Cairo, Egypt.
Up next, two church congregations that became one. See why Sunday morning is not the most segregated day of the week in this community. Some great news to share. Christian music artist Carmen says he is cancer-free. He shared the good news on Facebook, telling friends and fans that it appears the rare form of cancer he was fighting is now gone. He wrote, quote, "They took tests and could find no trace of cancer. That's amazing." He thanked his fans for their support and prayers, saying, "You all have been the best friends, brothers, sisters, and prayer warriors I could ever hope for in this life." Carmen says he is still healing, but will also be working on the release of his new album. Carmen, we are so thankful to hear the good news. God bless you. Well, another well-known name in Christian music, Darlene Zschech, updated fans on her battle with breast cancer. And on her most recent blog, she wrote she's finished round 1 of 5 chemo treatments, and all she can say is grace, grace, and more grace. She went on to say through it all that she is learning to rest in every promise from Jesus, and she told fans it's his word that is keeping her strong. She also says writing has been a great comfort to her and plans to share songs birthed from this trial. Darlene, our prayers go out to you as well. Well, you might think nothing good could have come out of Hurricane Katrina, but you'd be wrong. Because of that horrific storm, 2 unlikely churches came together, and they're both better for it. Jennifer Wishon brings us this remarkable story.
Sitting in the heart of New Orleans, First Grace Church is known as a beacon of Christ's love. In fact, the pastor says he's surprised if people don't come forward to join the church on Sundays. But getting here has been a journey. After Hurricane Katrina ravaged New Orleans,
storm hit, there was, 5 to 8 feet of water in the building.
Pastor Sean Anglem was put in charge of 2 United Methodist churches located 1 mile apart, the Black congregation of Grace Church and the white congregation of First Church. It wasn't long before God revealed his plan, and Pastor Sean approached 2 of Grace's longtime members.
So I asked them, do you believe we can do more for our city as one body of Christ than we'll ever do as 2 bodies of Christ a mile apart? And they started crying. And I knew that I had asked the right people.
So in the fall of 2007, 2 congregations that had worshiped so close to one another yet so far apart united to become First Grace.
Like children in the first day of school, half of us sat on one side and the other half sat on the other side.
The first worship service was glorious. Then it was discombobulating.
They were looking for their old usual seat, and that wasn't here. Other people were sitting in those seats.
It's all right there in the scripture if you just read it. People are in Egypt, they leave Egypt, they're all elated that they've left Egypt, and they get out in the wilderness and they turn to Moses and they said, "Why did you bring us out here? To die?" It's like, don't you remember?
I really told our members, if we're going to be a part of First, we have to mingle, we have to mix.
And then, after about 4 months, things clicked.
The music really does help with the diversity. It ties both cultures together, kind of. In North Louisiana, we have tried to do Southern gospel music, but it never really, we didn't have the soul that this church has, you know.
It's not always easy, though. When things draw the curtain on America's racial divides, First Grace members choose to lead with love and allow Christ to work out the differences.
Those hard conversations, they're like family meetings where you sit down and you say things that you felt you needed to say, but they hurt. But guess what? Now your mom's in the kitchen making dinner. Okay, people didn't go away. This is who you're going to live with, and that changes everything.
I think that people have learned to appreciate difference, and that has been a point of growth for all of us, that you don't have to look like me or live where I live for me to appreciate what you do and what you say, and that is a part of the Christian way.
Stone doesn't get polished without friction.
Exactly. It takes pressure to make diamonds.
John and Mary Cosper joined First Grace 2 years ago.
If you're in a box your whole life, it can be difficult to understand what other people think and how other people process things.
That's why Pastor Sean believes First Grace is on the front end of what's coming, a time when there won't be room for excuses.
They're about you feeling comfortable. Well, is that what Jesus was about? You being comfortable about the way you live? Or Jesus inviting you into a greater glory if you would open yourself up to that struggle and to that walk out of Egypt?
And if you truly want to be Christ-like, you have to live like him. And if you segregate yourself from other people, people who don't believe the same things as you, people who may be different, you're not living as he lived.
Let the people say amen.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, New Orleans.
Finally, tonight, we remember an icon of the golden age of cinema. Former child star Shirley Temple has died. She was 85. As a young girl, Temple was the #1 movie star from 1935 to 1938. Her popularity has been credited for helping save 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy. But she once said her greatest roles were as wife, mother, and grandmother. She was married to her husband, Charles Black, for 54 years, but was also politically active. She even served as ambassador to Czechoslovakia under the first President Bush. Good night.